Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the WPF Unholy Trinity, bindings, converters, and dependency properties. From this moment onward, things will get interesting. Under CoreUI, create a new folder. Let's call it components. The first component that we will build is the dialog. I would like to define the dialog size just to avoid hard coding the values of the width. Let's create initially the view of this dialog. New user control. Under the dialog content code behind, we need to define basically the header background, dependency property. The type of it's going to be brush, header background. The owner class, it's dialog content. For the default value, it's going to be brushes and white. The next dependency, which is the content that we can put in the header. Let's call it header. It is an object, and we need the main content, and we need the footer. You can do here null if you will, but it doesn't matter. And let's add another constructor by passing the main content as an argument, set dynamically the content of the dialog from the code behind. The problem here is the main content should maintain the state. What I mean with that is if you want to put some content that change over time or it has some kind of state, let's say for example a progress indicator, therefore this whole component dialog content should implement the notify property changed. Here we have to pass the framework property metadata to make the content dynamic and to preserve the binding and the animation. After this, we have to specify the flags. This main content could affect the parent arrangements and it could affect the measurement of the parent and it requires to be re-rendered. And with this property change, we have to call a function basically to refresh the content. Let's call this function refresh. Generate a method, and underneath I'm going to create a function that's going to refresh the content. I'm going to use notify property changed, the property which is main content. Now we have to define this function notify of property changed. Notify of property changed. Instead, I'm going to use here the color member name, string and property name, and inside the refresh method we have to do if this particular dependency is of type dialog content, we have to call refresh. This should be internal. We have to do here dialog and refresh. And I'm going to provide here a public method that's going to update the main content. It's going to use the notify of property changed name of main content. Now let's define the controller that's going to assign the different aspects of the dialog. Use just a normal view model by implementing the interface I notify property changed. I'm going to copy the same implementation of this notify of property changed. And we need a function that's going to show the dialog. And to show the dialog, we're going to use material design WPF. It needs a dialog host ID. It's going to be an object, dialog host, and show. This is an async function and return object, nullable object. We have to pass this controller as an argument, the dialog host ID, and the method that's going to be used to open the dialog and to close the dialog. Dialog opened event handler and the dialog closing event handler for closing action. And let's pass those as an argument. I'm going to shorten this basically without using return. And I would like to add another function to close the dialog. I'm going to use the dialog host and close the dialog. I would like to add another method, show basically the dialog with its dedicated content dynamically from the code behind. As a first argument, it should be an object, nullable object, content. Now for the implementation, it's very easy. If the content is null, we're going to throw an exception. Otherwise, we have to call the dialog host and show the dialog. And it should be static because we don't need actually this reference. I think that's pretty much it for this implementation. Let's focus on the snack bar components. I will provide the background brush from the material design colors that we have defined under the theme. Let's implement a function that's going to allow us to get the resource from the application resource file. All right. It has to return brush and have to pass here as key. I think that we can use this actually in some helper function, if you will, under util UI helper. I will add here another function. It's going to be a static function. It's going to give us brush from resource, all right, or from theme or whatever. We have to pass here the key, have to cast it to brush first of all, and application and current. try find resource, and you have to pass here the key. Let's do a fallback value by doing here brushes. It's safe to do here transparent rather than another value. Let's try to define the success brush, get brush from theme. This is the right key. I know there's some kind of mismatch. It shouldn't be drawing. It should be media. With the same manner, let's define the others. And that's all for the background brush. Let's not hard code the snack bar duration. And let's define the severity of the snack bar. And let's define the snack bar state. It's gonna be a public record. For the first state, it should be the message and the severity, and whether this snack bar should be visible or not. And you have to define the icon for this snack bar and the background brush. And let's provide here an empty state for the snack bar. Now for the icon, I would like to add here a class that's going to, in order not to hard code again the icon name, it's going to be a public static class snack bar icon resource. For the success icon, it should be from image resource circle check. Likewise for the others, let's come back to the state and let's add the icon state. And that's all for the snack bar state. I just realized that we haven't implemented the dialog content. We're gonna do it later on once we implement controller and the content of the snack bar. Now let's come back to the snack bar and let's define the controller for this particular view. This time we're gonna use the observable object. We have to mark this class with partial class to allow code generation. The first state which we have to do here, which is of type observable property, snack bar state. And we have to add another state, snack bar message queue from material design themes WPF. It is private. Let's add a function that's going to close the dialog. It's going to be a relay command on close. We have to basically change the state by doing state and width is visible equal false. We have to clear the message queue. Let's add the functions that's going to set the message and the set severity. And now we'd like to proceed with the builder pattern. This function should return snack bar controller set message. For the message, I'm going to update the state with message and to return this. Likewise for the severity. Now in case of info, for example, or success or whatever, we have to update first of all the state by assigning, for example, the snack bar severity and the background brush to info and to set the icon name to the dedicated icon name as shown here. Likewise for the rest of the cases, I'm gonna fold this section and at the end, we're gonna return this. Now let's define the function that's going to show the snack bar. We need basically the content to be shown. It is an object and the duration. First of all, we have to update the state is visible to true. And we have to use the message queue and to enqueue the message. And we have to return this. Now let's add the content of the snack bar as a reusable component. Let's call it snack bar content. Let's switch to code behind. The first dependency property, it is the state of the snack bar and the accessibility identifier for testing purposes. And we need to attach the command to close the snack bar. Now let's switch to the content of the snack bar. I will assign the minimum width of this grid that's going to represent the content of the snack bar, 400. And for the max width, let's do 450. It's just a personal preference. Now we have to place the icon as well as the text in a horizontal sequence. Let's define the column grid. For the first column, it should occupy, let's say, between 10 or 9% of the width. And the second column, it is auto to occupy the rest. Let's add another grid, another column definition with the same that we have done earlier. Let's use the SVG image component, SVGL and SVG image. Let's import it. For the width, we can access the static resource and let's choose large icon size. Let's fix this typo. Let's come back to the theme dark to do the same thing. If it's not recognized, we have to build basically the project, Control Shift and B. All right, let's add the height from static resource and large icon size. I'm gonna add some margin and the vertical alignment to center, override, fill color from the theme. How to do so? We need to use binding, and the source is basically the static resource and brush and primary foreground. However, we have to access the path, which is the color from brush. Now we have to attach the source. We have to use binding because the source here, it's gonna be from the state icon name, but we have to find the relative source. It's gonna be from the user control. Telling WPF look for this dependency property in the relative source, which is this particular snack bar content, which is a user control. The second item in the column should be the text block. It should be placed here. I'm going to assign the vertical alignment to center, and I would like to attach, for testing purposes, the automation ID. Now for the font size, static resource and medium font size. For the foreground, it should be foreground from the theme, and the style, static resource. Let's do body 1 text block, the text wrapping to wrap. Now we have to specify the contents of this text by using binding. And because it's variable, that's why we have to use binding here. We have to look for this under the dependency property state, and it's called message. Now we have to tell WPF where to look for. Now we are done with the first column. Let's add the second column that should be on the top right corner, which is a button as shown here. On this side, the background should be transparent because we need to show an SVG file within the button. The border brush as well. Now we have to attach the command. In other words, whenever we click on this button, what we should do. Let's attach this command from the dependency property. Inside this button, I'm gonna put the SVG file close circle. Now we have to get the source from the image resource file. How to do so? First of all, add here source, and we have to use the X static, and let's call this namespace, for example, images. You can call it whatever you want. We have to access from the images the image resources. I don't know if it should be called resource or resources. It is debatable. By doing here XML NS and do images, CoreUI assets and images. Now we have to access the close circle. I think that's pretty much it for this snack bar content. Now let's come back to the dialog context because it's empty. We have to represent each item in a vertical sequence, and we can use stack panel. The header of the dialog by using material design and color zone. This is a custom component under material design. I'm gonna add here some padding, let's say for example 5, and the elevation to 0. Next, we have to assign the background according to the header background. From the dependency property that we have created earlier, we have to put the title of the dialog as well as the button that's gonna allow us to close the dialog. Therefore, I'm gonna represent this by a grid. For the first element under the column definition, let's do here the default width. And for the other element, it should be auto. And if you do remember, under the dialog content, we have to set here the header, which is an object. In other words, it is a reusable component. It could be a button, it could be a text, we don't care. Therefore, here we have to use the content control. It's like a placeholder. It should be center. And now we have to put the content header dependency property. We have to add next to it the button that's going to allow us to close the dialog. And one is referring to the second element. The elevation for the button should be flat, basically, and vertically centered, transparent background and border brush. And let's add a tooltip, for example, close. Inside, let's add the SVG image, close circle. And that's it for the contents of the dialog. Now we are basically done. What I would like to do here is to preview in isolation those two components to make sure we have done things correctly. Now, unfortunately, under WPF, we don't have this capability or possibility to do so. There is no predefined preview or interactive preview for that matter. The only way to add here a project in this solution, and after you are done basically implementing the solution or your entire app, add it to the get ignore. Therefore, I'm going to create a new project. It should be a normal WPF project or application. Hit next. I'm going to name it CoreUI Preview. Or let's name it something like CoreUI Preview Host. It doesn't matter. It should be under the Pocket Goods folder. Hit next. And create. In this preview project, we need the community toolkit and .NET SVG for to customize basically some stuff. Now we have to add to this particular preview host two dependencies. Projects reference, check core and CoreUI, and hit OK. Now let's go to the XAML file under app. We have to add the dictionary for the Pocket Goods theme. I would like to register the first dependency, which is the snack bar controller. Add new folder. Let's call it DI. Under DI, we have to create the first module just for preview purposes. Let's name it CoreUI preview module. There's a sealed class. It has to implement I module. And this is basically the chance to see how to use the module that we have implemented earlier. As I said before, we need to register only one dependency, which is the snack bar controller. You have to use app container shared and register as singleton. We need to register the snack bar controller. Now inside the app code behind, in the constructor of this particular class, we have to use the app container to register the module. Let's create an instance of the module, CoreUI module or preview module, and do build. By doing build, it's going to register all the needed dependency. In my opinion, this is very readable and reusable and maintainable. All right, that's pretty much it. Now inside the main window, I'm going to create a scroll viewer for each preview, a dedicated button. Once clicking on the button, for example, snack bar preview, it's going to navigate to snack bar preview window and display whatever preview you want to see. I'm going to put everything under a stack panel. Let's do a preview for the dialog. We have to add here a button. Let me zoom in a little bit. All right. Now we have to attach and create this open dialog preview under the code behind. But before that, I would like to customize this window. I'm going to apply the font family from the static resource or Lato regular. And let's do, for example, the style of this window, static resource and material design window. I'm going to add another button for the snack bar. Now let's switch back to the code behind and let's define the function that's going to open the preview for dialog preview. And let's add another one to open the preview for snack bar. Now we have to create the previews for the modal preview and the snack bar preview. Under preview host, create a new folder. I'm going to call it preview. I'm going to create another folder for the preview of the snack bar as well as the dialog. Let's start with this dialog preview and create a new user control. Let's name it modal preview or dialog preview. In order to use the dialog under material design WPF, we have to wrap the parent content with a dialog host. Let's call it app dialog host name, and the identifier, let's add it from the constant file by using x static. Let's use the namespace util and UI constant. I don't know if it's going to be able to import this. Okay, we have to do it manually. App dialog host, embedded dialog host. Now what I would like to simulate what we will be doing actually in our app. By clicking on a button, we're going to open a dialog. Therefore, I'm going to wrap it with grid and a button. It's going to be center, vertical alignment, center, and on click, let's add an event handler, button click, and content. Let's do, for example, open dialog. I would like to simulate what's going to happen again under our application by adding another user control representing the form, like the login form. Now, basically, this is the content of our dialog, CoreUI dialog, and we have to use the dialog content. Let's import CoreUI dialog. Let's customize the width of this dialog from CoreUI dialog. It's not static resource, it should be x static and CoreUI dialog. Let's do medium. Now for the background and material design and background, why dynamic resource? Because we need to handle dark theme and light theme. The header background, we have to do here primary. All right. Now we have to define the placeholders for the header as well as the main content. Now for the header, it consists of a text block, body 2, and for the text, let's do, for example, login. The main content with the same manner, a stack panel, and let's add, or let's just show a normal text field, and let's add underneath the button. I'm going to add a generic view model for this preview. Under preview host, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it common. A new class, it's going to be for the view model that will be used in different sections of our preview host. The first state, it's for the email. It is required. It's added the error message. The email is required and notify data error info for login, private async void on login async. 2 seconds. And let's show this message box logged in with this particular email. All right, let's come back to the form. And in the code behind, we need to assign the data context to the main view model. I will add another button to close the modal on click. Gonna name it close click. And for the login button, we have to assign the command, which is binding and login command. We don't have to do here the relative source because we have set the data context for the form to main view model. It's called login command. In the code behind of, first of all, we have to change this to close, click, and we can access the dialog controller, and we have to close the dialog by doing dialog controller close. We have to provide here the app dialog host ID. I don't know how it's gonna look like. Anyway, let's come back to the preview. In the code behind, we have to create a new instance of form and show dialog. And we have to provide here the form as well as the host ID. I think that's pretty much it. Now we have to come back to the main window to add this preview. Dialog preview is a window. We have to change basically the dialog preview to window. Now let's come back to the main window and show this particular window, dialog preview. Okay, we have to change this basically to something else. Form dialog preview. And here we have to do form dialog preview. I think that's pretty much it. And let's run the preview. You have to switch to the CoreUI preview host and run this particular project. Let's open this preview. Open the dialog. We don't have basically the content. All right, close the preview and let's investigate. All right, we have forgot basically to add the main content and the footer. I'm going to copy this section, and underneath the color zone, we have to add here the main section and the footer. And under the close button, we have to add, after tooltip, the command that's going to allow us to close the dialog. And you can access the static function under the dialog host, close dialog command by doing x static, material design, dialog host, and close dialog command. Let's run the preview. Dialog preview, open the dialog. All right, we have the text field, but we don't have the leading icon. And we can basically close the dialog. I'm going to change this to the correct layout. I'm going to add here another grid. The column definition, the login button should be right here. 1. For the background, I'm going to do secondary and horizontal alignment, right? And let's add some padding here. Now we have to attach basically the text to the text field by doing binding and the data context and email. And we have to set the relative source user control. And because it has to be a two-way binding, we need to add the update source trigger, properly changed. And for validation, we have to do validates data error true, two-way binding. Here for the border, transparent. Now the only thing that we have to do here is just the icon. All right, so this is the text field with the leading icon. We have to use text field assist and leading icon and email. And we have to set has leading icon to true. This is the attached property that was missing. Let's run the preview. Open the dialog. All right, we have to add some spacing here, but anyway, let's do it right now. I'm gonna add some margin. All right, now let's see how it's gonna look. Okay, I'm going to put something here. The validation doesn't matter, to be honest. Let's close the window. Open the dialog. It's gonna close. It's working under the dialog controller. Now let's just do login. Let's see if we have an error first of all. All right, we have a lot of errors here. All right, so we had some typos. It was before like this. It should be like this. And here we have to specify the relative source, and the correct name of the command is login async command. All right. Now let's open the preview. All right. If we provide, for example, an empty value, it's going to give the validation. And after clicking on login, after 2 seconds, it's going to show this message box. I think that's it for this preview. Let's focus on the snack bar preview. Add a new window WPF and let's call it snack bar preview. I will add a button to show the success snack bar. Here it should be error. I'm gonna add here margin top. For the border brush, I'm gonna do same thing. Let's name this function show error snack bar. All right, show success snack bar. Okay, now let's come back to the preview code behind. Now we have to inject or to resolve the dependency snack bar controller. Let's name it snack bar controller. Initialize this snack bar controller equal app container and shared and resolve snack bar controller. And we have to assign the data context to snack bar controller. Now let's show this snack bar by doing snack bar controller and set severity. Now we are under success. All right, I don't want to use this. I have to use a component. All right, new snack bar. Now for the state from snack bar controller state, from the snack bar controller close command. And let's customize the duration. It's by default short, therefore we don't have to do anything here. With the same manner, copy this. Here it's going to be error and error snack bar message. And that's pretty much it. Now let's come back to the preview. Underneath this stack panel, I'm going to add the host for the snack bar. I'm going to add here margin 16, for example. For the horizontal alignment, I'm going to add right. For the vertical alignment, bottom. As you can see here, it's going to be placed at the bottom of the screen. And the background from the state by doing binding and state and background brush. And for is active, in other words, to be shown, and the message queue. I guess that's pretty much it. Let's come back to the main window to add this preview and show. Run the preview. Click on snack bar preview. Let's show the snack bar error. We have the snack bar error. This is an error. This is an error snack bar message. Close it and show snack bar success. As you can see here, the background changes according to the severity, which is what we want. And we have the icon. And for this one, we have this particular icon. We can't change the icon if you will, but it serves purpose anyway. That's pretty much it for today's video. For the next tutorial, we're going to implement our custom text field. I'm not too happy actually with the implementation of the material design text field. It is good for most cases, however, it's very limited. Therefore, I have decided to implement from scratch the text field, and by far, it's going to be the most difficult section of our tutorial. I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next video, and happy coding.